All right, well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Brent Hills, and I'm very proud to be the Deputy Director for Sastoon Public Schools. While it's really good to be able to join virtually, it's important to say we'd much rather be hosting this event in person and look forward to the day when we can do so. Tonight's consultation is focused on our city center project, which is bringing together the communities and schools of Pleasant Hill, King George, and Princess Alexandra schools into one modern education center. As this project will impact generations of families in Saskatoon, it's important to acknowledge that we gather here today on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homelands of our Michif and Métis peoples. As we are all treaty people, we recognize the commitments to one another in reconciliation, and tonight, in our efforts to build relationships and create strong communities in Saskatoon. I'm very pleased to have the relationships of the people that are joining me here tonight. I'm joined tonight by our Director of Education, Mr. Shane Skirvin. As well, we're joined by Derek Kinderchuk and Bertrand Bartake of Kinderchuk Agri Architecture. And moderating tonight's session is our Saskatoon Public Schools Marketing and Communication Manager, Veronica Baker. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I would now like to turn things over to Saskatoon Public Schools Director, Mr. Shane Skirvin, to bring greetings.
Thanks, Brent. Veronica, I'm trying to turn on my video. It's not letting me, but that's okay. I'll just speak anyway. Good evening, everyone. As Brent said, I'm Shane Skirvin. I am the proud Director of Education with Saskatoon Public Schools, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight with all of you to learn more about the City Centre project and the community engagement process that we're currently undertaking. So I just want to take a minute to, first of all, thank our administrative team and Kinderchuk Agri Architecture, who have been working hard on this project, as well as members of all three school communities, Principals Dulcie Poby, Karen McDonald-Smith, and Tammy Watney of the three schools, and all of the different members of administration and our school division that are currently working on the project. Would like to acknowledge as well that we have many members of our Board of Trustees on the call tonight. Again, they're in the audience, just like many of you, as this presentation will be provided by, as Brent said, administrative team and members of Kinderchuk Agri Architecture. But I wanted to acknowledge and thank the members of our Board of Education for taking the time to be with us tonight. On that note, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Hills, and he will begin the process of working you through tonight's presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Shane. Appreciate that. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is threefold. First of all, we're going to be sharing tonight the test fits, the updates on the test fits on the two sites, that being Princess Alexandra site, where the school sits, and the Optimist Park site. As well, the second purpose is to provide time for your questions and provide you some answers to those questions tonight. And lastly, we want to gather feedback that will be collated and presented to our board on the May 11th board meeting that's upcoming. So due to the number of people in tonight's Zoom session, we've set up a presentation style consultation that allows for participants to type their questions or comments into the chat at the top of your screen. If you're not familiar with Zoom, you just need to scroll up in the green bar and you'll see there it says Q&A. You click on that and you're able to type your questions or comments into that area. And at that time, Veronica Baker will be monitoring the chat and be able to present questions to us after the presentation is done. So as you watch the presentation, about the first 20 minutes of tonight's session, we ask you to consider what you like and don't like about the test fit designs that you're seeing on your screen. We ask you please take time to record your comments and questions in the chat feature. And at the end of our presentation, we'll have a question and answer period, as well as other ways in which you can share your feedback, not only tonight, but in coming days and weeks. So I just want to give you a little bit of update on sort of the history and process to date, where we have been. In March 2020, the Ministry of Education announced approval for the amalgamation of King George, Pleasant Hill, and Princess Alex schools. The announcement came 2 days prior to our pandemic shutdown in the community. While the results of this shutdown meant delays in the project due to an intense focus on student and staff safety, we certainly regret not being able to consult community in a more fulsome manner during this time. However, since that time, our consultation has included many people and many groups. We've had regular contact with the families attending the 3 schools. We've had our principals and administrative teams phone each of the families 3 times and interview them on certain aspects of the project to date. As well, we've conducted some in-person interviews at the schools. We've created an Indigenous Cultural Guidance Committee comprised of elders and traditional knowledge keepers that currently work with our schools, as well as elders from Saskatoon Tribal Council and the Central Urban Métis Federation Incorporated. We are thankful for those elders and traditional knowledge keepers, and they will be with us along the journey to completion as their valued input and knowledge will make this school and this community stronger. We've also had a Zoom conversation with the Community Association members of Riversdale, King George, and Pleasant Hill in February of 2021. This was followed up by numerous emails and phone calls throughout the following months. As well, consultation with Saskatoon Public Schools staff and our partners, most notably Saskatoon Tribal Council and the City of Saskatoon. All of these ongoing consultations are valued, and we appreciate your time and energy in giving us the feedback we need to create the best school environment for students in the years to come. For those of you that are new to the conversation, I would also like to add that the original City Center project only considered the Princess Alexandra School site. However, in listening to members of the community, we began to explore Optimist Park. And just to be clear, I promised the city to mention that the City of Saskatoon owns Optimist Park. And while they've given us approval to do a site study, we would still need approval from the city to build on this site. Throughout our continued conversations, 5 more sites were added to our list. And now we included 7 potential sites on what we call a desktop study. The desktop study looked at a variety of factors such as availability, size, proximity to students, safety, environmental contamination, traffic patterns, and many more. Site reviews were presented to our board, and in early April, they made a decision to move forward with the Princess Alexandra site and Optimist Park site. If you want to find out why the other 5 sites no longer are being considered, we encourage you to visit Saskatoon Public Schools website for more details. As you can see from the timeline on your screen, we are still in the early stages of this project, right between the orange and blue dot. All the information we gather at these consultations will help inform our board when they deliberate on the final site for the City Center School in May 2021. I will now turn things over to our partners of Kinderchuck Agri, and I believe Bertrand and Derek are going to walk you through the test fits. Once again, I will remind you to please add your questions or comments in the chat as they arise, and we look forward to answering those questions after the presentation. Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen.
Well, thank you, Brent. It's Derek Kinderchuck here. It's a pleasure to be addressing. And Brent, if you don't mind moving along to the next slide, that would be very good. We're here to sort of describe to you the process that we've gone through in looking at the test fits. Where, as Brent mentioned, we're looking at 2 site locations, the Princess Alexandra site and then the Optimist Park site. The next slide sort of goes into what the test fit purposes are. And if I could ask the slide to be advanced for that. Really, the test fits are here to test fit the required building and outdoor areas on the proposed sites. They're big blocks of building volumes on the property. The details are come at a much later stage. This early stage really just helps determine what physically fits and what are the opportunities and the challenges of a particular site. How many stories could the buildings be, and how would they impact the site or fit the site? As well as how the site can include for potential partners. A multi-purpose building can offer so many benefits to the community and building users by taking advantage of the synergies between partners and complementary uses through shared spaces and programs. So at this very early stage, we deal with the information we have before us. So what's included? Just overall building areas. We look at the orientation of maybe the built volumes of the site to see how one can compare to the other. We look at the access opportunities for not only people walking or cycling, but vehicles, buses, transportation routes, simple traffic routes. We explore the relationships between the buildings and how they might fit the site and how they might relate to the site and orientation, depending on where they test fit. The relationships are, again, large scale and factoring in outdoor spaces and the program requirements relative to those outdoor spaces. So what's not included and will be explored in the future phases of the project will be the design and form and shape of the building. So by no means is anything you're seeing here exploring those opportunities. These are simple blocks, and albeit they're square, they may be other shapes and forms. Defining of the actual building program will come at a later stage. We know the basic pieces of it, but the details will come yet. That will include the relationships between specific rooms or spaces and the interior circulation. And the cultural responsiveness of these design strategies will be further defined and explored in future phases. So that gives you a little bit of a summary of that portion of it. This slide helps you maybe relate to what Bertrand will be sharing with you shortly, and that's the program components, those big blocks that I just referred to. So the elementary school programmatically is shown in the sort of call it a lime green color for pre-K to grade 8. We know that the parameters of that as to what are funded for 500 students, expandable to 600, and also considering how relocatable classrooms will need to fit the site. The orange colored space is the childcare portion of the project that is funded, and that's a 74 spaces for childcare from ages 0 to 5. We know that of the potential partnership with STC, and in that we've got allocated under the blue space, a blue color, the areas and volumes that are potentially associated with their education, employment, training, health services, recreation, and programmatic components. Outdoor spaces shown in green then, those that we know are part of the school, when it comes to tarmacs, playgrounds, outdoor play areas, basketball courts, all of those sort of funded spaces. And then we study the parking implication relative to staff and drop-off zones for childcare and school as we look at the various opportunities in studying the sites. So Bertrand's going to now go through the various test fits.
Thanks, Derek. Just a quick sound check. Can you hear me, Derek? Somebody?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, perfect. All right, thanks. It's great to be here today to share with you folks everything that we've been working on for the last little bit, and we're excited to be able to hear from you and respond to your comments after we go through these test fits. So as mentioned, we have 2 sites that we were asked to look at. The Optimist Park site is the first one, and many of you will know the existing conditions. It's one of Saskatoon's oldest parks. There's a sledding hill. There's a future active transportation corridor planned on 19th Street to the north side of the site. There's also a partially city-owned site, Kitty Corner, to the northwest. And then there's a series of community amenities towards the east side of the site, playgrounds, paddling pool, some of those court spaces. So really what we were looking at when looking at the site is more towards the west 2/3 of the site, and leaving the majority of the community amenity spaces as they currently exist today. The map on the bottom just shows the location with the yellow circles indicating a 5 and 10 minute walk radius. So you can kind of see how that site is located relative to the communities of King George, Riversdale, Pleasant Hill, and part of the West Industrial area there. The site size is 7.1 acres, but as I mentioned, we're really only looking at about the 4-acre side for the purpose of this test fit. That's not to say the school will occupy 4 acres. It's just to say that's sort of the sandbox where these big blocks were being placed. And then I did mention that city-owned site. So we're looking at potentials of that site to maybe help mitigate the impact on the park. And we'll see through some of the options, but that there's potential parking or replacement of recreation spaces on that site. Next slide, please. So we're just going to take you through four test fits on this site. And as Derek mentioned, really we're trying to find out, what are some of the opportunities and challenges of the site. So the first one, what we're intending to do here is to see how much of the existing amenities could remain on the site depending on where you put the building. So if you put the building located to the southwest corner of the site, sort of aligned with 18th Street and Avenue L, then the sledding hill, the ball diamond, all of the amenities on the east side of the site could remain. And this option is not showing surface parking, but we know that parking is a requirement. And so sort of the least impactful scenario is to explore options of surface parking could go on that city site or underground parking or other options. So one thing we found out when we did this one is, while it didn't disturb some of the recreational spaces on the site, what it does do is the building then shades some of the outdoor spaces because the building's on the south side. So just thinking about year-round use, the building may block the sun through most of the winter. And so that's just one of those opportunities and challenges that we discovered on this site. Next slide, please. So the previous option and this one are both two-story schools. This one moves the building to the north side of the site. We're looking at drop-off of Avenue L, and then the buses would be on these are all local roads, but the busier of the roads would be 19th Street, and that's where we'd be looking at bus drop-off at the moment. You can see in this option, by moving the building to the north side of the site, the field areas are maintained. Obviously, the sledding hill is gone in this case, but as we get to developing outdoor spaces, it's a very real possibility that a sledding hill might be a desired amenity from the students and the community as those get developed. So you can see those outdoor spaces, they will get full sun throughout the year. And this option does show some surface parking there just off of Avenue K, right on 19th Street. So kind of over top of the ball diamond there, you can see a little bit of it there. Next slide, please. And as Derek mentioned, STC is a potential partner in this project. And so we also included test fit explorations that looked at 30,000 square feet for STC programs. And in this case, it's a complete two-story building. We'd be looking at either underground parking or off-site parking. Obviously, surface parking would eat up more of the existing area of the park. So STC is lined up sort of within visual of 20th Street, aligned with Avenue K there. And the idea here is that the school front entrance may be more off of Avenue L. The buses could still be on 19th. And then STC would have a series of entrances off of 19th Street, with, of course, the child care center on the corner there. Next slide, please. We also investigated options to build up in the park. Now, I mean, the current zoning in the park has a height limit of 11 meters, so a three-story building would be a zoning variance, but it's worth exploring as it does create more land mass at grade. So there's more room in the park and less building footprint. by building upwards. And we've been talking to the community about 2-story and 3-story, and many of the families are already in schools that are 3-story, if you're thinking of King George. So it hasn't really been a stretch for that. So this one has partial surface parking as well as partial underground parking. So again, looking at ways in which you can minimize the amount of impact on some of these spaces while balancing all the project requirements. Next slide, please. So the second site that we were asked to look at was the site of the existing Princess Alexandra School. And so the site really is from the back of City Center Church all the way up to where the SPS maintenance facility is, that sort of stepped looking building at the north side of the image there, top of the image. Some of the site characteristics here, obviously this is more of a commercial residential mixed neighborhood. Avenue H and 20th Street are really bordering the site. There's a planned west central multi-use corridor that runs along the railway tracks. And we heard today that actually part of that got funded up to Avenue F. So we're expecting to see some construction on that this year. So that's a bike path and a walking path separated from the rail line and not accessible to cars. Other features of this site, obviously the City Center Church there. White Buffalo Youth Lodge is on 20th. And then, of course, there's lots of history and lots of access to services along 20th Street. The north side of the site is actually within the city's BRT corridor growth area. And so over time, it's likely to see more density closer to 22nd Street. Again, the image on the bottom, the map shows the walking radius and the location relative to the neighborhoods where these schools are being consolidated. Next slide, please. So on Princess Alex, we looked again at 4 options that we're presenting to you today. This site's quite a bit narrower than the Optimist Park site, and so there's potential for really to have access off of both Avenue H and Avenue G. This option looks at a 2-story version. That's the K-8 school, as well as the Child Care Center. The Child Care Center oriented to Avenue G, and the school oriented to Avenue H. It's anticipated the bus drop-off area would likely be off Avenue H. And in some of these options, we're recognizing that the rear of the City Center Church is really an inactive space. And so we're trying to push the building away from that in some ways to create room in there. And then, parking and potentially some drop-off in there can be a more active use than if the 2 buildings are pushed right up to each other. In this case, the outdoor areas are to the northwest or the west side. So, protected from the Avenue H traffic, but we also looked at other options, as you'll see in the coming slides, where we flip that relationship on its head. Next slide, please. So again, just another configuration of this, switching the orientation of the Child Care Center. So, drop-off can potentially be in that parking lot. You create sort of a 3-sided courtyard that opens to Avenue G. Buses in all options are really looking at the Avenue H side. And really this one's, just really creating a protected outdoor space that faces Avenue G. So you'll notice that the mount, if you look at sort of the area summaries on the left-hand side of the screen, The building footprint is taking up about 4,000 square meters, and when you factor in parking, it only leaves about 3,400 square meters. And then below is sort of the list of the bare minimum of outdoor spaces that we would recommend designing. And so you can see the number doesn't actually add up. And so we're also looking at the potential use of the SPS maintenance facility site. And there is almost 3,000 square meters of buildable area on there. So as you'll see in the next option, that maintenance facility building is gone in that test. So please move ahead to the next slide. So as mentioned, the on-site parking is moved to where that maintenance building was, and it doesn't have to be parking. It could be outdoor space. Really, I think there's some value in that, is what we've learned through some of these test fits. Obviously, SPS would have to relocate their maintenance facility in that case, though. So there's sort of a pros and cons to that. This one adds STC as a program component, and STC has a close adjacency to the existing White Buffalo Youth Lodge in this case. So there's some synergies there. But we really just kind of explored the concept of the outdoor spaces being a front yard to Avenue H. And so things that we're thinking of and have discussed are, is it better if you open up those outdoor spaces to passive supervision that you would get from facing the houses and the busier roadway on Avenue H, or is it better to flip it to Avenue G side and a little bit of a quieter street, but less passive supervision? So those are just some of the opportunities that we're exploring through these. And you can see by moving the SPS maintenance facility, again, if you look at the numbers on the left, we're really looking at creating more than enough space for the landscape elements that are looked to be included in this project as we move forward. Next slide, please. And finally, again, looking at what does it mean to be a 3-story school versus a 2-story. Quickly looking at the numbers on the left, you can see that a 3-story school and a 3-story STC building block added to it, along with some surface parking and a little bit of underground parking. There's still enough room on that site to accommodate the minimum landscape elements. And we looked at other ways, in this case, the portables or future modular classrooms that are added on to the building could go up at a higher level and not take up at grade sort of land area. So looking at different ways of maintaining what's there once the school is built. So I think that's the last of the test fits. And I guess I'll toss it back to you, Brent.
All right, thank you very much, Bertrand. So at this point in time, we'll just turn our cameras on here, and we can maybe take some questions. And so I just want to let you know, on the screen here, you'll see that there are a variety of ways in which you can offer your questions up. You can certainly type them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them right now. You can email citycenter@spsd.sk.ca, or you can complete a feedback form on the Saskatoon Public Schools.ca/City Center website. So a variety of ways, and so don't feel like you have to ask them all tonight, but certainly continue to provide feedback as we go on.
Ready for questions?
You bet. Thank you, Veronica.
Yeah, no problem. The first one we have is what were the criteria that were followed when examining potential sites? And did the school board work closely with the city of Saskatoon to determine alternate sites other than Princess Alex and Optimist Park?
Yes, and so I'll start and I'll maybe ask Bertrand or Derek to come in and talk a little bit more about the test fits and what was looked at there. But we did work with the city of Saskatoon. So ultimately, like I said, we started off with Princess Alexandra site only. And it was a community member that came forward and then suggested the Optimist Park site. And we began to explore that. And so that was the first part, the first two sites that we were looking at seriously. In consultations with the public, we learned of other sites, and that's when we approached the city of Saskatoon to do a study in the area of what was out there, whether it was available or not, just vacant properties that were perhaps privately owned. We went through that process and contacted each and every one of those individual organizations or companies that own that land, and asked, was it available, and of course what might need to be done if it was a brownfield site or so forth. It's important to note, though, in all of this, the ministry never did provide any dollars for purchasing sites or reclamating the land. And so those are two things that we do not have dollars for. And so that would not be an opportunity for us. The reason why we can explore Optimist Park site is that we would be, if that is the chosen site by our Board of Trustees, that we would be exploring a land swap situation with the city of Saskatoon, as we do own the properties and schools where Princess Alex, King George, and Pleasant Hill schools are currently situated. So Bertrand or Derek, if you wouldn't mind stepping in and talking a little bit about the test fits, that would be, and sort of the areas that we were looking at, that would be appreciated.
For sure. Yeah, and maybe just to note, some of the sites we looked at were vacant or underutilized. So we looked at parcel P. We looked at the site just northwest of Optimist Park. We looked at several around Avenue P, and we looked at the King George site as well, in addition to these two that the board selected to move ahead to stage 2. Some of the criteria that was part of the desktop review included, as Brent mentioned, whether the land was owned privately or if it was owned by SPS or the city of Saskatoon. If it was a brownfield site, is reclamation required? What are the current zoning and land uses on site or around the site? But also, what are the future land uses and on the site and around the site? So, the ones that the city has identified in policy, whether it be the local area plan or the official community plan. Other components we looked at were traffic, safety, the accessibility via transportation networks, be it by bus, by foot, by bike, or by car. And I think that's most of the criteria. There were 10 categories that we looked at. And it was methodical, and we presented that to the board. And these were the two that were selected to move ahead.
Next question. Contamination is a big problem in this area. Will you study the future school site to determine whether there is contamination there and clean up this contamination if necessary?
I believe the answer is yes. Any site that we proceed with will have to have a site study done and to see what the soil is like and so forth. Fairly confident because Optimist Park has been a park for so long, and we know the recent history of where Princess Alexandra School site currently sits, that we won't have contamination, but nonetheless a site study or contamination study a soil sample study will have to be done.
Does the money for the school include improvements to infrastructure in the area, such as sidewalks, crosswalk lights, increased water service, etc.? If not, who's responsible for paying for these upgrades?
Sorry, Bertrand, do you have knowledge on that one?
I don't know the details, all the details of the budget, but definitely we're going to be working with the city on the safety elements in terms of providing safe crossings. Often the crossings directly adjacent to the school property do come out of the project budget, but it's important in these neighborhoods to look at the expanded network, and obviously there is crossing the railway tracks for both of these sites for Pleasant Hill and some of the other neighboring communities, and there are some busy streets nearby as well. So that's definitely an element that's going to be considered, and we're going to have a lot of conversations with the city to try and make sure that there are safe ways to get to school, not just by car.
And that also includes service infrastructure upgrades as well when it comes to the city infrastructure. Those discussions will be started as we further study these sites.
Yeah, we have a civil engineer on board who's already been looking at the underground infrastructure relative to both of these sites. Unfortunately, they're not on the call today, so I don't want to put words in their mouth, but that's something we're looking at right now, even as part of this early site work.
What can be done to reduce surface area so that there is a larger yard area and so less green space is disturbed, such as no surface parking, multi-story building, functional roof spaces, outdoor classroom, etc.?
I mean, I think the question answered itself in some ways, and through some of those test fits, you would see that we are thinking about that as well. So, does it make sense to go to a 3-story building? Do you go higher? That would require rezoning. Obviously, underground or offsite parking is a consideration. We'll be through future phases of this work, exploring all opportunities regarding outdoor spaces, be it at grade or on a rooftop. Even in the 3-story versions, there were some lower sections in these studies that, if oriented the right way, could become a nice usable space for students. And obviously, looking at on-grade outdoor spaces being preferable, because when school is not in session, those are spaces that the community can use as well. So definitely a preference for minimizing the building footprint impact at grade, and of course parking is a consideration there too. So lots of options as we move forward there.
Next question. Are you aware that Riversdale is 1.56 acres short of the City of Saskatoon's neighborhood park space entitlement with only 8.57 acres? Taking Optimist Park from the neighborhood would remove 7.09 acres, leaving only Icing Park at 1.48.
Yes, we are aware of that, and we heard that from the city and from some of the residents of the community there. So certainly, if Optimist Park becomes a reality and the city gives permission for us to put a school there, there will be a land swap taking place, and so there will be land and park space going back to the city of Saskatoon, and so that would be certainly part of it. The other part is, as Bertrand mentioned earlier, the school and site would only take up 3.5 to 4 acres of Optimist Park, and that would include the park area that the school would have as well. So it's not like we're putting in a building that is as large as the P3s. I think some people, when they hear city center project and hear about partners, right away they start thinking of the P3 model schools, those great big schools that were put around the city a few years back. And this is not that kind of school, and so it certainly would not take up the space that you see. And again, going back to the 3-story building and all those things that Bertrand just finished talking about would help retain park space in that area as well.
Next question. Why isn't the King George School site considered? It's just a few blocks south of Optimist Park. The division owns it. Parking exists. There's room for more buildings and a large modern addition. The deferred renovations aren't urgent and could be done over many years. It's unethical to walk away from the investment of generations of taxpayers.
Yeah, in order to renovate King George, first of all, there were no dollars for renovations given by the ministry on this project. So that's one thing that we did not receive as renovation dollars. The deferred maintenance would have to be addressed if we started to do any upgrades to that building. And the deferred maintenance costs are estimated between $27 and $32 million. We only have a $29 million budget total. And so, this would be no additions, nothing else, just the upgrade of that school in itself. And so the King George School, for that reason alone, certainly is not something that we would consider renovating. Bertrand, anything to add to that?
I think you covered most of it. Obviously, the size of the site is somewhat comparable to the Princess Alex site. But the main thing is those renovation dollars. And then as well, we know there's been some comments about other funding sources to renovate the building. We've actually looked into many of them, and while some of them might have potential, most of them are not eligible for a project like this. And many of the maintenance deficiencies, that in addition to those, there's also some significant building code deficiencies that would have to be addressed, and accessibility items. And the numbers that Brent gave don't even include for fixing of some of those. So yeah, it's multifaceted, really.
One of the other things I could add is that there'll be a parallel process as we select the site to work with the school board and looking at those sites and the repurposing of those facilities. So they're not going to go sort of without a parallel process and effort, and that's part of the scope that we're going to be working on with the school board and the community.
Next question, and I think you kind of answered this, but just to go over it again, if the Princess Alex site is necessary, why not adapt the division's facilities, maintenance shop for parking to save money? You're prioritizing parking over kids' play area in all test fits shown. So if you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, I think at this point, all things are on the table. I know one of the test fits did show the maintenance shop being moved in order to create more space and more park space. The potential of moving off the parking off site as well. And even in the one test fit, having some underground parking, which obviously has more expense to it, but it would certainly save some green space for the school. And so it's certainly looking at all those factors, we are considering at this point in time. We are still early, but these are the things that we're trying to consider as we listen to people about things like green space and all the amenities they're wanting to see in their new school.
Next question, what's the recreation feature that STC City mentioned but never detailed? Is it appropriate to create a health facility beside a daycare and an elementary school? I don't know if you guys can speak to that.
Well, I can say for fact, we've been working with Sastoon Tribal Council, very proud to be partners with them, and so we're still in talks about the potential of the partnership and what might come our way, or what might be part of the project itself. Obviously, having partners like Sastoon Tribal Council will bring great amenities and programs to the school and site, and the partnership would not only allow the school to operate during the day, but in the evenings and weekends there would be great amenities for students and the community to use as well. And so when we talk about the STC building, they are mentioning things like office space and so forth, and many of their programs that they run. One such program is the Pathways to Education program, which is a tutoring program for students, and it's an after-school program. So that would be right there for students after schools, Monday through Friday, to be able to access tutoring. Obviously, having more recreation facilities, more gymnasiums, and places for healthy activity for youth and adults. These are the things that will benefit by working with STC on this project.
Next question. What happened to the school division's commitment to community schools with smaller class sizes?
Brent,
Yeah.
can I take that one?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. So class sizes are determined year by year through the budget process in the school division, and in our elementary schools, class size has not changed for many, many years. It's been the same. Currently in administrative procedure, we do have allowance for additional staff and teachers to be placed at 4 core community schools: Princess Alexandra, King George, Pleasant Hill, and Westmount. We do not anticipate that changing with the consolidation of this school project, and our commitment to smaller class sizes in this consolidated project will remain. And again, it's going to be based on budget year after year, but we do know the importance of smaller class sizes and the positive impact that it does have on student learning, particularly in these 4 communities. So we will do everything we can to keep class sizes as small as possible. The overall enrollment might be bigger, will be bigger, obviously, in this consolidated project than any of the 3 individual schools that are currently situated within the school division. But as I said, the commitment to having additional teachers in place to lower those class sizes, we'll do everything in our power to ensure that that's taken care of.
Next question, when can we provide design feedback?
Sure, I'll take that one. So this, I think Brent, maybe even the next slide has the schedule again. Maybe we can go to that. There we go. So yeah, right now we're site validation or site evaluation. And once the site is determined, we will start with some programming discussions and some, we've already started some visioning sessions with some of SPS's leadership, and we'll be talking to the teachers and students and our Indigenous Cultural Guidance Committee. So there will be several community opportunities to provide input on the design after the programming stage. So the programming stage will happen. Schematic design is likely where you're going to start to see some layouts of the building starting to show up on the chosen site. And we have plans to continue to engage the community as well as the other stakeholders throughout the design process, which leads all the way into spring of next year.
Next question, maybe we've somewhat answered this, but why wasn't the King George site more favorably considered? What do you see as the issues of that site for the new school?
I mean, I'll just maybe add some additional comments to what was already discussed, but based on the size of the site, it's likely that much of or the entire school would need to be demolished to accommodate a modern learning facility based on the budget that is allocated to this project. And obviously that's not something that we want or the community wants. There's no contiguous green space adjacent to the site. The location was a bit further off central than some of the other sites considered. Those are some of the additional reasons beyond what was already spoken about.
Yeah, I can add to that just in working with the community and talking to many members of the community. Obviously, they don't want to see the school being boarded up and becoming a eyesore or a problem in the community. And that's certainly what we don't want as well. And so as Derek mentioned earlier, we will be working with the community and with the province and going out for requests for proposals to find out what can potentially happen to the school sites that are no longer needed. And so, you know, very very pleased to say that we have been approached by organizations, not organizations that want to go public yet. We have to wait for the public RFP process, but we're very hopeful that these sites will be continually used for positive community interactions and benefits to the immediate community. So that's our hopes, and we'd like to start that process as soon as possible once our final site is chosen for the city center school.
Next question, it's long, so I'm just going to paraphrase a little bit. Reclamation may be required for Optimist Park and Princess Alex. For example, Optimist Park is across the street from significantly contaminated sites. How will the school board reach out to Imperial Oil and the adjacent landowners to understand contamination risks should the school go there?
Yeah, we will have to, and like I mentioned before, we will have to do the soil studies on those areas before we do any construction. So that will be part of the process. We have already talked to Imperial Oil. We reached out to them regarding if they were interested in sale or donating land, and of course they're not. And of course they acknowledge that that land is contaminated as well. So there is potential. You're right, but I certainly know that we will have to go through that process regardless of which site is chosen.
And that would be a process that would happen fairly early on in this to make sure we look at that potential, call it a risk or existing condition, to understand it through initially a phase 1 environmental, and Brent mentioned some geotechnical work that we'll be looking at as well, which would further determine if any future environmental levels are required and what the reclamation process might entail, if there is such required.
Next question, what is the current percentage of students that are transported by bus to the current schools, and is this expected to change with a single school?
So currently, the 3 schools share 4 buses, and the city center, depending on the site, would have to move to 5 or 6 buses, as we certainly are promising families that we would be able to provide transportation, as we know the walking distance would be increased for some of the communities. While that may sound right away off the top of the head like it's going to be an increase in costs, the estimated cost per year with regards to amalgamating 3 schools to 1, just with decreased administration, increased efficiency in the buildings, our estimated cost of savings per year is between $200,000 and $250,000 in moving to a new school that's energy efficient with 1 administration team. And so certainly the offset in those costs would certainly pay for the extra 1 or 2 buses that we'll need to transport students to the new site.
You've somewhat answered this, but maybe we can cover it because it's top of mind for many. What do you plan on doing with the 3 abandoned schools?
Yeah, just like we mentioned, moving to a request for proposal. And again, this is guided by the Ministry of Education and putting out proposals to sell the school and property. And so that's what we would hope for, is that we'd find someone who's very interested in maintaining or repurposing those sites. That's one option. The other option is that if we end up making a land deal with the city of Saskatoon, then some of the land that those schools sit on would then go to the city for their purposes. So there are options, and again, it's our hope and our desire to make those communities, keep them whole, and keep those schools to be something that the communities can use and be proud of.
Next question, as a parent who is concerned about the heavy traffic and rapid commercial growth around Princess Alex, are there any particular things that will influence the choice of location, or will this depend mostly on city approval and potential partnerships?
I mean, partnerships is one of the factors. Obviously, traffic and safety and accessibility to the site. Do you have to cross a busy street to walk to it? Those are all considerations which we're studying right now. and will be part of our package that goes to the Board of Trustees for when the decision is made.
Next question. Could you say something about the results received from the consultations with the parents of the present students attending the city center schools?
Absolutely. First of all, a huge thank you to our admin teams at those schools for making all those phone calls and talking to their families. And of course, then we also had the opportunity for some one-on-one visits. As with all groups, we heard diversity in answers. So it's not like they all lean towards one area, but everyone's excited. A lot of excitement about a new school and a new learning environment for their children. If you're a family member in one of the Castle schools, the only bathrooms for students are on the very basement floor. They're looking forward to having more natural light and more integrated learning spaces. Looking forward to seeing some of those benefits that we see in some of the suburbs of Saskatoon with those new schools and having this great learning environment for their children. There was concerns about the transportation. There was concerns about traffic and so forth. We heard those loud and clear. Some families were adamant that it had to be Optimist Park, and others were adamant that it needed to be Princess Alex. So certainly we're still collating the data. We just were out at schools yesterday, and so I heard lots of great, exciting stories about what this might mean for their families, and also some concerns, and certainly listening to all of them. Anything you want to add, Derek or Bertrand?
No, I think we certainly heard passion, and it's good to hear that from the community. I think that there was appreciation that we came out, and for us as part of the design, to hear that information firsthand is very valuable. And we will we'll consider all of that as part of the project team and weigh all of that information, look at the cultural impacts with the partners, and no, certainly I think Brent, you covered most of it. It was very informative though.
Next question. In most of the recent school projects, portables became a reality almost immediately. What land area is predicted to be used for this kind of expansion, or is the building design accommodating a vertical expansion?
Yeah, I can take that, and thanks for the question, Annette. So even through some of the test fits you saw, where we were either accounting for portable classrooms on site adjacent to the school, the maximum that the school is being designed for is a stable enrollment of 500 students, and the addition of 4 portable classrooms or modular classrooms is what's being accounted for. So what that means, in all the test fits, we were either looking at 2 classrooms and then stacking 2 more on top, or even looking at locating all the modular classrooms on top of the existing building footprint. So on the 2nd level or adjacent to the 3rd level in some of those options. So it's definitely something we're aware of, especially in the tight sites and the ones where, one site is a smaller site and the other one's a park. So we're looking at all avenues to see creative ways in which we can minimize building footprint impact on those sites.
Next question. We have repeatedly asked for details about the school renovations and have never received it. You've recently put a new roof on King George. Why not demand the province cover the costs of their existing schools?
So in our presentation to the community associations, and we also shared the PowerPoint and PDFs with the community, right in there, we put in all of the upgrades and renos that need to be done. So not only is it the exterior, the masonry that's starting to deteriorate, it's the building envelope, the windows, insulation, waterproofing, fire safety, sprinkler systems, new staircases, obsolete mechanical boilers, electrical systems, interior fixtures, the casework, walls and flooring need to be repaired. And the more, like I said already, the exterior masonry repair, and of course the most important, accessibility. There's no wheelchair accessibility in those buildings. Our ministry has made it very clear they are not wanting to maintain those buildings of that age with the amount of cost there is in renovation. It's a lot more cost effective to build a new school for $29 million as opposed to spending, over $60 million in upgrading all three of those schools. So that's where we're at with that. I'm not, Shane, if there's anything more you wanted to add to that comment.
No, I don't think so, Brent. You've covered it well. I think, as you said, I mean, the dollars for the project were based on the school consolidation, and of course, at this time, no dollars would be provided. And as you said, the deferred maintenance of those three schools combined is well over $60 million, and the overall cost of a new facility is $29 million. So.
Next question. So it sounds like the ministry decides whether to keep historic buildings by only providing money for new buildings. Who determines the value of our built heritage? And will you hold another meeting to provide details about the historic values of Pleasant Hill and King George?
I guess I'll start off by saying at this point in time, they are not just, I mean, they are old, but they certainly have not been declared historic sites. And that could change, of course. And so as far as value goes, that's where the request for proposals will have to go out. And it's certainly something that is new to myself anyway, and we'll be learning along the way, but it is a process that's directed by the Ministry of Education. And so we will definitely be looking for someone out there that would be willing to take on these schools and do something for the community, and obviously find purpose for the community members.
Next question, if Optimist Park is the chosen location, how much land from each former school location will be allocated, traded as park space?
That would be negotiated with the city. I would not have the answer for the percentage or amount of land that would have to be swapped. I'm sorry about that.
Next question. In one test fit, the maintenance shop is removed, and that must be a significant cost factor. Why couldn't that money be used to renovate King George and then have Princess Alex be used for White Buffalo expansion? This would save by allowing White Buffalo to use existing space instead of demolishing Princess Alex. This must be a significant saving in both regards.
Yes, I can comment that we are looking at many options with regards to the Princess Alex site. And because of the constraints of the site, one is potentially demolishing or relocating the maintenance facility. When you think of those, the cost of such a thing, you balance it against other costs. Would you require underground parking? How tall are you building the building? At a certain height, it starts to get more expensive. Do you have to increase the structural capacity of the building so that you can put portable classrooms on a roof? Are you needing to design roof spaces for students to use? All of those things are costs that you have to balance against all the decisions, and of course that goes along with all of the other project requirements, needs for space, and every other project requirement, space for building, space for parking, accessibility, all those things we've been talking about tonight. Did I capture everything on that question, Veronica, or did I feel like I maybe missed a portion of it?
I think it was about the savings from the maintenance shop and how that could be poured into keeping it at King George. I got to go back to the question here. Yes, if the shop is removed, is that a significant cost to replace, and couldn't that be folded back into King George?
Yeah, I mean, it's not in the tens of millions of dollars to relocate the maintenance shop. It's closer to $1 million or around that number. So it's definitely not enough money to renovate King George just by that savings.
Next question. How will kids who live near Pleasant Hill School walk to either site safely for important after-school programs, especially when it's dark in winter?
Well, so most of the programs in schools take place right after the school day. There'd be very little evening programming and events, just like it is now. All of the extracurricular activities take place after school. And so we are looking at transportation options. One of the comments from community was, they said their child doesn't always get out of bed on time to make it to school on time. And they were hoping that there might be a bus that would swing through the neighborhood and pick up their child at 9:30 or 10 some days. And so, we'll look at some creative options for transportation and certainly wanting to meet the needs of the community. And at the same point in time, encouraging families to arrive to school on time, as education is an important part of children's lives. And so we certainly would do our best to maintain our programming, either before and after school program as well, immediately before and after the school day and over the lunch hours, so that we're not having students walk back at nighttime in the winter.
Yeah, and just if I could add to that, important part of this project is that we've recognized that there are some gaps in the transportation networks, especially in the junction area. So there are many city blocks without sidewalks. Obviously the rail line is a bit of a border. So we're going to be working with the city to identify those issues and promote that they investigate and provide solutions for safe ways to get to the school from the immediate neighborhoods. And obviously we're pleased with the West Central multi-use corridor that could actually serve both sites, planned from Avenue W all the way to downtown as a potential safe route that the city has already partially funded.
And I think a capital project like this school project will help advance some of the city efforts as we're already seeing, because the means starts to be there, and this is a project going to happen over a number of years, so it helps the city also do some capital planning to facilitate this short-term outcome. So I think there's lots of synergies to be captured.
Next question. In a land swap, the replacement park will be lacking the mature trees of Optimist Park. There are over 200 mature trees in Optimist Park. How will we ever replace what exists today for green space?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We've already been in touch with the city arborist, and there are, I believe, over 200 trees in that park. Some of them are, I think almost 40% are of an ash variety that's being ravaged right now across the city. And so some of those are dying and are going to need to be replaced. Obviously, when you build a building or any structure in a park setting, trees will be affected. And we're going to work with our landscape architect partners to first identify any significant heritage resources as it turns in referring to trees, but also then to look at ways in which we can provide outdoor spaces that include new trees in locations. As far as a land swap to the city goes, first it would have to be determined that Optimist Park is the recommended site option, and then the details of those conversations are to come. So I would imagine there's probably a city engagement process that would involve what becomes of these newly acquired park spaces.
Next, an accelerated construction timeline, minimal disruption to the community, reduced cost and improved quality can be achieved with modular construction. It seems like a good fit. Will the school be designed such that modular builders may bid on the construction contract? I anticipate modular builders would be competitive in the tender process.
I mean, short answer is all options are on the table. We haven't really determined methods of construction or even the layout of spaces yet. So we know that every type of construction has pros and cons. Obviously, when we're looking at modular, there's some dimensional constraints. There's the portability of them. They have to be designed in such a way that they can get from the shop or factory to the site. And there are some formal constraints as well. So what kind of shapes can you build? How big can it be? And delivery and all of those kind of considerations. So that's the long version of the answer. The short answer is everything's still on the table.
Next question. Avenue J is a very narrow street and totally residential. Wouldn't either Avenue K or L be better for school bus traffic if the school was located at Optimist?
So again, right now, we'd be looking to meet with the city to show options and then to discuss the busing and drop-off scenarios. When we looked at Optimist Park site, 19th Street is the one that looks like it would have more activity based on its connections. So it does connect to downtown, whereas some of the other streets around, they're all local streets, but they don't connect to destination points. And so that's sort of what we were thinking with the test fits at this point, but definitely room for things to move around as the project gets developed.
And part of the project will also be a traffic analysis. As we look at that, we'll be working with people who specialize in that area. And that will be part of the understanding that we'll come back to the community meetings to look at those assessments and get the community input into those as well. So that certainly will be an important piece of it.
Next question. In city planning, where you build a school has a profound impact on the surrounding communities. Was the centrality of the location a priority for the school board during this process?
Obviously, we certainly want this new school to be central to the communities it serves. And so when we started working with the city in identifying potential sites, and we came up with those 7 sites, that was one of the considerations that went through in the test fit. And when you saw the graphs up there that Bertrand shared with you, the drawings with those yellow dotted lines, we were taking in consideration the 5-minute walk distance and 10-minute walk distance for families. So certainly centrality is important to us, but it's not everything. As we also know that a large number of students already are transported to the schools that they attend, even though they are close to walking distance. And so we promised that we would continue to offer transportation to this new school. And so those are some of the considerations that we were thinking of.
Next question. Why was King George not properly maintained over the years rather than letting it deteriorate to the point where it's being abandoned?
Yeah, and thank you for the question. It was maintained. I guess there's a difference between maintaining and upgrading, and so I would like to be really clear that both King George and Pleasant Hill were on our list of renovations since 1996, and so since that time we've kept them on there looking for upgrades to those schools and not received it. And so while we were really pleased that the city center project was approved by the ministry. Obviously, we were not being funded for upgrades, but now rather replacement and consolidation of schools. So it's not like it wasn't tried. We received dollars for maintenance, but not for upgrades. So painting a window as opposed to replacing it, fixing the boiler as opposed to putting a new one into the school. So those are the things that our maintenance crews and our facilities department have been working with and keeping those schools running. But now they're at a point where they do need replacing.
What is the estimated value of each of the school sites today? Has the sale prices of both abandoned school sites been addressed as recouped money that could be used to offset the cost of renovating King George?
Yeah, we don't have the estimated value of those schools and properties. That would yet to be done once we've made our decision on where we're moving. As far as recouping that, there's a formula that's set forth by the ministry. Saskatoon Public Schools does not get rich by selling these schools, so a large percentage of those dollars go back to the Ministry of Education, as that's how we're funded. So it's not like we'll be able to sell the building and then keep all those dollars for Saskatoon Public to do what we want with.
What is Optimist Park currently zoned, and does it not restrict development? Are there any other examples in Saskatoon of existing parks being converted to a school?
Yeah, I can take that one. So the existing zoning in the area is R2, which is 1 and 2 unit residential. There's some requirements you can see in the zoning bylaw: 40% site coverage, 11-meter height restrictions, certain setbacks. Being a park, it has its own set of rules and its own process that goes through the city. And so there would be notice given, and there'd have to be public meeting, and there's a whole series of steps to convert a park into MR space for a school. If it's the recommended option by the SPS Board of Trustees, the project will have to go through that process. Another example of a park that has been, or part of a park that has been converted to a school site is actually in, it's WP Bate, so just west of Pleasant Hill. That occurred, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, Derek?
Probably a little longer than that now, but closer to 20. Yeah, where there was an existing park that the school moved to, and then the former school site then was converted. So there was definitely a conversion involved in that instance.
Just read. School board has up to 5 years to do something with the abandoned schools. Can you guarantee that these abandoned schools won't become a blight on our community?
I guess guarantee is a strong word. We're going to do everything in our power to try and make sure that these sites are purchased or are looked after in one way or another. Working with the community is a start and finding out what needs are out there, going to the RFP process. And like I said already, we've already been approached by certain individuals and organizations with great interest in these properties. That's promising on numerous levels. And so again, once our site is confirmed, we will be entering that process right away, as we know that's certainly a major concern for many residents as to what's going to happen to those buildings.
Similar question. You mentioned the King George site was not seriously considered because the existing building would have to be demolished to rebuild a new school in the budget, but the community does not want the building to be demolished. Does that mean that the school site will be sold with a condition that the building must be maintained, or are you just delaying the inevitable demolishment of the school?
So I feel like I should maybe answer that because I said the building might need to be demolished. I'll add some context to that to that comment. The context is if a new education facility of the size that is required for this project needed to be built, there's a high likelihood that the building would need to be demolished. That doesn't mean that any other community use or partners or organization that wants to purchase the building would need to demolish it. It was more in the context of the funding that's provided for this project and the requirements for a modern education facility with all the bells and whistles, and not regarding any future potentials of the building for other uses. So I don't know if there's anything to add to that. anybody else on here, but
I think you covered that.
The city estimates a population of 500,000 citizens in the future. Has the traffic flow, vehicular and train traffic been factored in with respect to this future population and how it will affect the selected sites?
Derek mentioned a little while ago that a traffic study will have to be performed in this area and for these sites, and so that's yet to be done. But certainly we'll look forward to that. And as far as 19th Street and which streets might be main thoroughfares or busier streets than others is a consideration as to where the front of the school might be, and of course walking patterns and biking patterns and all those types of things as well.
yeah, and the growth to 500,000, that's a larger scope question that the city planners would have to be involved in answering. Obviously, there's lots of moving parts in the growth plan, and those are things that the city planning department is actively considering.
How long does it take to convert a park compared to converting a brownfield, such as zoning, possible remediation, that kind of thing?
Good question. I don't know the answer. It would depend on the site. Obviously, if it's privately owned, there's land negotiation for sale. And then there's additional testing on the remediation, on whether remediation needs to occur. And then you have to decontaminate a site. So, you know, on the other side of things, the park has its own process, you know, through the parks bylaw at the city, and that can take months. So it really kind of depends on the individual conditions. I don't think there's a sort of a catch-all answer for brownfield sites.
Next question, in regards to fire safety, have safe mustering points for 500 students been properly addressed at the considered sites?
That's part of our school safe plans. Every school has a fire safety plan, and it's achievable on the amount of land and space required for schools. And so not a consideration as we know that we're able to do it, whether it's a extremely large collegiate like Walter Murray, where you have 1,300 students, or elementary school of 600 or 700. We certainly have plans for quick and safe evacuation where students can muster far enough away from the building, and of course having warm and safe amenities that they can go to in the case that the school cannot be re-entered for a period of time. So these are something that we take in consideration each and every year, and the plans are revisited to ensure that we have the safety of our students and staff forefront in our minds at all times.
Next question, land swaps do not increase or preserve the amount of green space in the area. It is just a swap of ownership of existing land. The green space that is built on, if it's Optimist Park, should be made up through the addition of new park space. Will there be conversations with the city about compensating for green space lost by, for example, adding a new park in the area?
It's a great question. I would think that yes would be the answer. We will be in conversations with the city if Optimist Park does become the preferred site. And so what that negotiation looks like and what it involves will depend on city council and what it is they're looking for. And of course, the residents that live in those communities and what their hopes are as well.
Next question, and I think you've somewhat touched on this. With either proposed site, Pleasant Hill kids will most likely have to cross busy intersections. What type of pedestrian corridors are being addressed for the safety of these children?
It's, as mentioned before, that's going to include active conversations with the city. As mentioned, we've recognized that there are gaps in the networks around both of these sites, really, and the railroad being a significant barrier. And we've mentioned the West Central multi-use corridor a couple times. That is looks like a really good plan to help address the railway barrier. Of course, there's other busy streets that you would need to cross to get to both of these sites from different parts of the catchment area. So those are things that we'll be talking with this, identifying and talking with the city about.
Next question. One rationale for this new school is the low percentage of local kids going to their nearby school. Will there be a greater diversity of programs such as ACTEL, French immersion, music, Indigenous programming offered to reach a broader, diverse base? Bedford Road Collegiate does an excellent job of this, which you know, Brent.
Yes, thank you. And that was, I'll take that. I'll take that one then for sure. As a former principal of Bedford Road, diversity is the key to success. And so, of course, programming it matters, and it matters not only to students and families, but it matters to staff. These are the programs that get us excited as teachers and educators to want to do the job. You know, when you have schools the size that they are now, not that they're bad, they're wonderful communities. They feel like family, but they're small. And so that means you have a limited number of staff that work in that building. Yes, the relationships are strong, but then you start to lack programs. By amalgamating the schools and having a school, 350 to 500 kids, somewhere in that range, and now you have enough staff to start offering great diversity in programming, and not only programming during the day, but at lunch hour and after school programs that we talked about before, where you start seeing things like drama clubs and theater and drumming groups and regalia making sessions and all these things that you see in other parts of the school, canoe clubs, outdoor egg clubs. So these are the things that we start to see when you get a school that's large enough to offer those things, but still small enough to feel like family. And so as far as programming goes, I'm not going to guarantee this will be a French immersion school or so forth. We do want the school to reflect its community. Currently in those three schools, we have roughly 68% of our students self-identify as First Nation or Métis, and so that's important to us. And so we are working with that with our elders and traditional knowledge keepers, and of course our community, and saying what's important to you, what do you want to see in this school, and we can't wait to make it a reality so that the families and the community are proud of this school.
Next question. I've heard that the Parcel P landowner is open to having the site used for the school and may even offer it for free. Why is that site not a contender?
Yes, thank you for that. We have reached out to Parrish and Heimbecker, the owners of Parcel P, and we have two emails, one saying the site is not for sale, and certainly not at this point in time offered for free. So we have correspondence with Parrish and Heimbecker, and we did reach out. That was a recommendation from a community member, and so we would not be moving forward with that. I guess that's not the only reason. There's heavy industry around that school site that's not moving anytime soon, and certainly feel that it's not a great location for an elementary school, and so certainly would prefer either Princess or Optimist Park.
One more question and then we're coming up on 8:30, so we may want to wrap up. Have the communities been properly consulted as to the after-hour use for each community's programs and access to the proposed sites for after-hours use? How will sharing one school be used by 3 communities?
Yeah, and so thank you for that question. We do have the utilization rates from the city of Saskatoon. It's a joint use agreement where community associations can book the schools. Right now, those 3 schools are used. Certainly they are used, as you know, many of you would use them, but they're not used extensively. And so we do think that there's room for all 3 community associations to utilize this new school, especially if we have partners in the school that provide more amenities, perhaps a second gymnasium and so forth, meeting rooms, culture rooms, and so forth. And so, we do want to ensure that they are accessible in evenings, and that will continue with our city joint use agreement, and look forward to seeing those schools being lively, vibrant places well after the end of the school day by the community. That's the hopes and dreams of this project. And with that, Veronica, I guess we will
Yeah.
we'll wrap it up there. I just want to draw your attention to the screen one more time and acknowledge that we are still early in this process. We're quickly approaching that blue bubble of May 2021, where a board decision for the site selection will be determined. Obviously, there's work to be done after that. As if it's Optimist Park, then we will be working with the city and seeing what the next steps are there. Then we move to that red dot, June 2021 through spring 2022. This is the design phase, partnership and design. This is an exciting time. The school site is chosen, and this is where we get to come out and do these types of dialogues and have these conversations with our staff and students and communities and families, and saying, what do you want to see in the school? Very excited about that. That continues into the summer of 2022. Then we go to tender in fall 22, and then the shovels are in the ground, and the construction hopefully completed in 2024, September 2024, or at the very latest September 25. And so this is the plan at this point in time. And I want to reassure everyone on this call that this is not once and done. We will be back, and I hope in person next time. And if not, I guess this is better than nothing, and certainly appreciate your questions today. I see there are still 3 questions. I'd ask that you will certainly get to them, but in the chat or through the email would be preferred at this point in time. I do see there's a note here that some of you have figured out that the form that we have online only holds 300 words. So if you're planning on asking a question that's longer than 300 words or have some comments that you want to make, please email us, and there'll be no limit on the amount that you wish to type at that point in time. I guess that's it for this evening. Again, I want to thank Derek, Bertrand, Veronica, and Shane for being part of this panel tonight, and look forward to the next conversations that we have. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll have a good evening.